What's up guys, and welcome to my new YouTube channel. So this channel is going to be mainly stories about the strange, paranormal, unexplained mysteries, things like that. And today's story is called "The Thing I Saw in My Parents' Bedroom Had Blood Red Eyes." But before I get to the story, I wanted to tell you a little bit about where I want to go with this. Not too long because I want to get straight to the story, but basically I've always had an interest in the unexplained and paranormal things, and just recently as well I've started watching these YouTube channels about those exact things, and I just want to credit them because if you like what I do or have started doing, then you'll love what these guys do, and it's well worth checking them out. So Mr. Barlin is the first one. He's the first one I started. He does all things strange and dark and mysterious, which is his catchline. And yeah, most of his, I've watched all of his videos, and they're awesome. They really are. So they're worth checking out. Go and check them out. And another one is Mr. Nightmare, who's very similar. He mainly does just scary stories, but the interesting thing about both those guys is everything is true. They've come from people, they send in their stories, and that is what I'm going to do today. And in my channel, my stories are going to be true stories that have come from either myself or things that are in the media, in the news, but also stories that have come from people. I want to open this up to anyone who views this this channel to send things to me, and I will try my best to do stories on everything that people send. So yeah, that's me, and that's what I'm going to be doing. So my name's Gareth, and if you have any story suggestions or anything you want to send to me, I'll add my Instagram in the link to this, along with also Mr. Barlin's and Mr. Nightmare's YouTube channels for you to check out. But also you can comment on these. So if you have anything, send my way, and I'll do my best to research into it and do the story. So thank you very much, and here we go. I'll start with today's story. So the person that sent me this story, I'm going to keep anonymous. So for the sake of today's story, we're going to call this person Sam. Now, Sam grew up in Italy. He was born and raised there, and in 1991, when Sam was 5 years old, him and his parents moved to Milan. Now, they moved to this apartment complex. It was built in the 60s. Now, I think it's worth mentioning that this apartment complex was built for the purposes of accommodation and homing people. It wasn't originally a hospital or anything like that. It was purely built for accommodational purposes. So in 1991, Sam and his parents moved into this new apartment complex, and if you imagine, it's a gated apartment complex, and there's various different sections all around. So there's lots of park parts and walkways and things like that in between. Now, Sam and his parents moved into a 2-bedroom ground floor apartment. So as you can imagine, it had kitchen, living room, bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. But there was a long corridor throughout, and as you came through the front door, went down the corridor, and the corridor curved round the side, and at the end of the corridor was the bathroom, and either side there was 2 bedrooms. Now, as you're going down the corridor, on the left-hand side was Sam's bedroom, and on the right-hand side was his parents' bedroom. It doesn't have too much of an importance to the story, but it's just so you can imagine how the kind of layout of the house was. Now, Sam always had this unnerving feeling of some kind of presence in his parents' bedroom, and would never ever go in there by himself. The only time he would ever step foot in the room is if both of his parents were with him. So, for example, during the night, if he was being put to sleep, sometimes he would fall asleep in his parents' bedroom for the night, but would never go in there during the day or at any other time unless both of his parents were with him. Now, it's also worth mentioning as well that because this being a ground floor apartment, so you imagine, as I said, there's pathways and stuff around these different sections of the complex. So there's the potential of people walking past, your window, not saying right next to it, but to stop people from, looking in. Sam's parents would always keep the blinds relatively low in the house. They wouldn't be completely closed. They would be kind of, a third of the way up or so, just so people could look in, but there wasn't that much natural light coming into the rooms of this apartment complex. Sometimes they would have them up, but the majority of the time they were down. So you imagine it's quite dark. Other than artificial light from lamps or top lights, it was relatively dark around. Now, this one particular time, Sam's dad had enough of this fear of their room. He just wanted to put him at ease, basically, and so he tried to take him into the bedroom this one specific time, to say, there's nothing in here. I don't understand why you're so scared of this room. Look, there's nothing in here. He took him in and was holding him and saying, look, there's nothing here. There's nothing to be afraid of. And Sam was in fits of tears. He couldn't control himself. And, his dad was there, head in his hands, thinking, I don't know what to do here. And I don't understand why you're afraid of this room. So, admitting defeat, Sam's dad picked him up and went to take him out of the room. And as he turned round, you can imagine he's picked him up, holding him, and Sam's head is looking over his dad's shoulder. As he turned round, what he saw terrified him. Absolutely terrified him. He looked over to the other side of his parents' bedroom, and crouched down beside the bed was this figure, this dark, humanoid type figure that looked like it was hiding. It was crouched down so that you could just see the top of his shoulders and his head looking straight at him. And for what seemed like the longest time, would have only been a few seconds at most, but to Sam it felt like an eternity. He locked eyes with this dark humanoid creature who had blood red eyes and was staring straight back at him, and he was petrified. He didn't know what to do with himself, but it kind of gave answers. That was why he was terrified of the room. There was this presence in there, and even though he never saw this figure in there again, but he always felt like there was something there. Now fast forward a few years, and there was more instances where he saw different things in the house. Now, by far, that one was the most terrifying. But later on in life, Sam was about 10, 11 years old, and he was home in his bathroom. And by this point, he had a younger sister, and she too was also petrified of their parents' room and would refuse point blank to ever go in there. But on this specific time, Sam was in the bathroom and he was brushing his teeth. And he turned and looked down the corridor, and if you remember what I said before, the corridor came through the house from the front door and turned left and went all the way down the end of the corridor was the bathroom. And Sam looked down the end of the corridor, and this freakish woman in white robes was just walking towards him, very, very slowly, like almost floating. It was walking towards him, and he was just staring straight at her, not really knowing what to do. He was looking, and she came towards him, and when Sam blinked and rubbed his eyes and looked back up, she wasn't there. And again, he never saw this apparition again. Fast forward another year or two later on, Sam's in bed, looked up at his doorway, and there it was. A middle-aged man dressed in this very smart but very, very old suit. And so if you imagine laying in bed and just looking over, which would be about, 2.5 meters away from your bed, into this dark corridor, and in the doorway there is a man. That isn't your father, it's nobody that you know. There's just a man in this old suit standing there staring at you. And that was it. Again, the third time Sam's seen something in this house. Now, a few years later, gets to about 15, 16-year-old, Sam's family actually moves somewhere else. Now, Sam was thinking that all these appearances of unknown entities or figures in his house, he was thinking, now I've moved somewhere else, they're going to stop. But they didn't. The one time, the family, they got a new dog. And this dog, on this one specific time, was just cowering in the hallway. Now, in this house, the layout of the house isn't important, but you've got to imagine, as you go in, you've got the door, and it opens up into the corridor. And the stairs go up, because this is an apartment, this is a house, stairs go up to the next floor, and then straight opposite the front door is the kitchen dining room. And the dog was in the hallway looking at the front door, and tail right between his legs, he turned round and ran under the dining room table and was petrified he wouldn't come out. And Sam was down on his hands and knees trying to encourage the dog to come out, and he wouldn't, until he stood up, he turned round. There was this terrifying, old, withered, wrinkly woman standing there in the doorway staring straight back at him. And it explains why the dog was terrified, but he was looking at her, and he couldn't help but notice that her skin was covered in burns, not just any burns, like severe burns, like this woman had just been in a fire or something. And for seconds it probably was, they were just standing staring until the dog made a noise. Sam turned to look at it and turned back, and the woman wasn't there anymore. And so even though he'd moved house, he was still seeing things. So from Sam's first experience at 5 years old, all the way through his childhood, to his teens, to his 20s, he was forever seeing things, and it didn't really stop. So it obviously wasn't anything to do with like an individual home or house being haunted or anything like that. It must be something to do with him. Now, as important as the first experience was when he saw that figure in his parents' bedroom, this next part is also a very key part, a very vital part of the story. Now, fast forward all the way till Sam's 20s, and by this point, he's actually moved out from his families, and he's living with his partner at the time. And even though he hadn't really seen this creature with the red eyes again, he still thought about it from time to time. Now, Sam was going through a really difficult time at this part of his life. He was suffering quite severely with depression. He was just in a very dark place. And for some reason, it started to bring on these thoughts about this red-eyed figure that he'd seen in his childhood. And this one specific night, he was laying in bed with his partner, and he was thinking about this red-eyed creature, and was not out loud, in his head, he was screaming and shouting and swearing and cursing this thing, and was just getting all this anger out by saying, like, I'm here, come and get me, you think you're tough, like, come and kill me, I'm ready for you, come and do it now, all of these kind of things. And he was just getting out all of this frustration, and all of a sudden his partner rolled over and reached his hand across onto Sam's chest, and then went up to his neck and then gripped really, really tight. And Sam was just laying there and was absolutely shocked at what was happening, but just lay there for probably a few seconds, but it must have seemed like an eternity. And Sam was just laying there until he reached his hand up and pulled his partner's hand off and just rested it down on the side. And in the morning, Sam asked his partner, "Do you remember what happened last night?" And Sam's partner said no, he doesn't remember at all. He doesn't remember anything that happened. And Sam just related that to that red-eyed figure and thought that maybe from there, after getting out all of that frustration and anger, maybe it moved on. Who knows? But from that day onwards, Sam never saw that figure again, and he didn't think about it too much, and he hasn't really spoke about it to many people either. So I feel honoured that he shared that story with me and is allowed to share that story with you. But in this day, Sam is fine, he's healthy, and yeah, he still sees things from time to time, but not quite like that. So that's it, guys. That's the story, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Now, hopefully I'll be doing a lot more of these kind of stories, so if you have any suggestions, anything you want, feel free to pop it in the comments below or send me a direct message on Instagram. My handle is gareth.vl, and I'll get back to people as quickly and as soon as I can. My next story, I'm already planning to do some kind of a mysterious disappearance story, so tune in for that. But before I go, I just wanted one quick thing to say. Now, I don't know what to call my channel. I don't want it to be just my name. I want it to be something catchy. Now, obviously I've subscribed to Mr. Barlin and Mr. Nightmare, just completely coincidental that there is a Mr. in front of their names, but I would like to have something which is, catchy. So I'm kind of holding a small competition to see what people come up with. So from now until the end of the month, so let's say 1st of March, if I have people message with things they want to be, people message with names they want, I'll pick the best one, and if I don't get anyone, I'll hopefully pick one myself. But until then, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you at the next video. Thanks, guys.